quick brief overview on what our role is in Austin and specifically the behavior department at APA as well. So I showed up in Austin June 1st of 2012 to meld Dogs Playing for Life programming with Austin Pets Alive. Austin was hanging out at about a 90% save rate at the time. So the goal was, well, the job's not done, so how do we now tackle the last 10%, which is why I came to Austin. So it's our programs are a melding of DPFL and APA. We're going to be, obviously spouting the playgroup thing just as much as we have this entire conference. Our role, I always like to say, so we're not open admission, obviously. We're the private nonprofit that is there to support the city shelter so that all of us as a community achieve no kill. So we're the safety net. So our population of animals will always be representative of who's currently at risk in the city. And so the dogs at 90 and earlier, compared to the dogs who are in our shelter today, are vastly different. Now that we're at a 99% save rate for dogs in our community, which insane, right? The dogs are becoming more and more challenging. And so our whole kind of effort every day is to figure out, well, if we've reached this kind of benchmark, if we've reached this stage of the race at the volume that we have, and if we're sort of the first ones to do it at this volume, what can we learn about it? What can we share with the rest of the community? And what are the trends we're seeing, and how are we actually saving the last 10%? And I don't want to necessarily, I think 90% is a phenomenal benchmark to give everybody, but I'm sorry to tell you that the work isn't done, right? You all know it already, but there are still a lot of damn good dogs waiting for us once we get to 90. So get to 90, celebrate, but then there's a lot of work left to do. So that's kind of what we're here to do, is show you the faces of who's waiting for us when we get to 90, and then how we are figuring out how to save them, and then what our obstacles are along the way. Sound good?
Right, so we like to bring up Jake when we first start to talk about who we begin to reach when we get past 90%, because Jake isn't just the dog that it's 90 and then there's Jake. Jake is that dog who's also sitting, in your 80% to 90%. We've heard the term frat bro said a lot today when we describe some of these dogs who are large, rambunctious, difficult to handle. I think Jake is a very good definition of our frat bro. You can see that based on these notes here, at the city shelter he became at risk because he had some notes of potentially resource guarding in his kennel, but mainly his biggest issues was that he was displaying what we call high arousal, meaning that he was very difficult to manage both inside the kennel spaces, and he was very difficult to manage when on leash. And then there were some notes about being just generally very inexperienced with dogs as well. And so CAPONE is a very similar story to Jake, but the difference in CAPONE is that CAPONE actually did hurt somebody. So CAPONE was actually put at risk by the city shelter on the euthanasia list because in these moments of being put back away into his kennel, he landed what we call a redirection bite. And that was, I'm so frustrated, and then he turned around and he bit a person who was walking him back into the kennel.
And so Olive here, what we're trying to do is paint you a picture of, these are the dogs that we first started to meet when we said, hey, let's push past 90. And so Olive here is an even more dramatic example of these three cases in that, again, no previous history. Jake, CAPONE, Olive, we have no history of any behaviors prior to coming into the shelter. It's in-shelter behaviors. And so Olive here started to definitely get into some trouble. She was jumping fences and enclosures within the shelter and chasing after dogs that were on walks within the shelter grounds and starting fights. She was bad at it. She would get her butt kicked usually, but it was still very problematic. They assessed her with a private trainer in the community before I got out there, and I don't blame them at all for coming to the conclusion that she might not be safe around dogs. I mean, clearly she's showing us that she needs some help and that whatever's going on with her in shelter is causing these behaviors. So, how did we save these guys? Well, the answer for all three of those dogs was playgroup. That's what we're seeing time and time again, were dogs that were at risk for any number of behaviors that really, once we were able to confidently pull them into our program, knowing that we had a resource such as Playgroup, to be able to really dig down deep and say, what is the actual dog story here? What are the actual needs? So we'll go into the individuals, I won't jump ahead of time, but Playgroup really is the program that is an absolute must when you're working around that percentile, because that's what I knew there was going to be good dogs left, but I was shocked at how many examples were time and time again we were seeing of dogs that all we needed to do was bring them to the playgroup yard, and it was immediately apparent that they just needed their needs met. They just needed to be allowed to be dogs, and all of that other stuff pretty much fell by the wayside.
Right, and so on that thread, Jake, the first thing we did when he got into our shelter was we immediately put him into playgroup. And discovered him to be very, very dog social. And these arousal issues, the impulse issues, all of these issues that were putting Jake at risk of losing his life completely went away when we could just offer him playgroup. And I do want to kind of show you, because we were dealing with some really serious stuff. So I think it's really important for you guys to know the ferocity of Jake's behavior in shelter. Jake's the black dog. So Jake was one of our helper dogs. Jake was it was a very exhausting role.
Very helpful.
He was very helpful in the way that he was in the way. So Jake is one of those success stories where he was in shelter for 3 months. Behavior completely went away just by giving him what he needed. And now he's been in the home for probably over 4 years at this point. And then along that same thread is CAPONE. So, we talked about earlier how CAPONE is a very similar story to Jake, but different in the fact that he did actually land a bite on somebody. But I hope we all know here that a bite is not a bite is not a bite. And APA recognized that, as so many have. And what we did was we said, you know what, we want to try to see what we can give this dog. And so when we pulled CAPONE, again, you're seeing the trend here, right? Put him in the playgroup, found him to be immediately dog social. Not only was he incredibly dog social, you guys, he was extremely gentle with people. He was so gentle with people, in fact, that he was actually found that he was great with kids. And we ended up placing him into a home with 3 tiny kids and 1 grumpy ass little dog who, you know what, that's all I gotta say about that dog. And I want to show you guys too, there's not much to this video, but the big white guy covered in mud, that's CAPONE. And that's because all CAPONE really wanted to do when he was out in playgroup was roll around in the mud and say hey to all of his new friends that he had just made.
Yeah, and so it's, what I love there is that, as Marion said, a bite isn't a bite isn't a bite. We know that that's a serious thing that we have to attend to, but I think CAPONE was telling us, I need help, I need more, I need to be able to just have my basic needs met.
Right.
And we never saw that reactivity, we never saw the redirections as soon as he started to get twice daily playgroup is what we do. So Olive here, again, even more serious version of what we're talking about. So even with that, so I showed up and she was already with APA, and I had several really passionate staff members that were just waiting to just tell me about Olive and want me to try to figure out a way to save Olive, because they were certainly starting to question, can we safely house this dog here? Is it safe to keep her here? Which was a legitimate question. So even for that, we said, all right, well, let's get her out in the playgroup yard. First things first, when I showed up, let's find our helper dogs. Let's get through all of our population. Great, I've got some playgroup rock stars. Now, you know what? This Olive dog I keep hearing about, let's bring her out into the yard and let's see what we're actually dealing with when she can actually access dogs in a more controlled manner. And so fortunately, fortunately, we were able to succeed with her. There's a funny, just quick story I like to tell about Olive where, and you're going to see her in the yard, not to throw too many spoilers out, but We brought her out, ended up being the epitome of dog tolerant. We never really saw any dog aggression out of her, which was very shocking. And we kept bringing her out to playgroup, different types of dogs, different times of day. She did great. One day, she was being brought to the playgroup yard, and the handler that went to go get her out of the kennel somehow screwed up. Olive squirted past her, was loose in the shelter, and there was like 4 dogs staged outside of the playgroup yard waiting to come in. And now all of a sudden, that's Olive, right? She's loose in the shelter. There's dogs to access. That was the problem we had been trying to address all along the way. I'm in the yard just like, oh God. And she sees the dogs. She looks at the playgroup yard. She looks at the dogs. She looks at the playgroup yard. And she just runs over to the catch pen to the playgroup yard. And I just let her into the yard. So we were like, fixed. You're fixed. We did it. So it was good that the handler screwed up, because we wouldn't have tried that out, right? We wouldn't have necessarily been like, all right, let's proof it. So it happened. So with playgroup, and hopefully most of you went to Amy's impact report earlier, but it really is the best bang for your buck. We are able to resolve dog-dog issues. That's the kennel routine video. We're able to create so much higher of a receptivity to training. And so this first video, go ahead. Boom. This is...
just kidding.
This is actually Jakey Boy again. We teach every single dog in shelter a kennel routine. That's one of the many things I brought to APA from what I've learned from Amy Sadler. And I don't know how well you can see it with the lighting, but Aaron is going into the kennel, leashing Jake up, and just teaching him, he's got to have 4 on the floor, he's got to have his eyes on Aaron, he's got to hold that butt on the ground while Aaron opens the door, wait for a release command, free, and now you can go. Every single dog at APA, every single dog, all 200 something, have to do this before they exit their kennels. And so for Jake, and I think he cheats here in a second, he starts like he's sitting, but he starts scooching. We didn't have in-kennel issues like what was reported, but since we do this for all of our dogs, we weren't really concerned that we weren't going to be able to resolve that. Just scooching. It's cheating. It's cheating. I wouldn't call that uncontrollable, but we dealt with it.
Uncontrollably cute.
Uncontrollably cute, yes. All right. So when we talk about higher receptivity to training, you're in school all day long, you're learning all these really thought-provoking lessons, and you need a lunch break, right? You need here, right? We're just working our brains, and we're just like, all right, when is there a break so I can just rest my brain? We need outlets. We need to be able to, we can't just be learning all day long. And in the shelter, you're stuck in your kennel all day, and all right, I'm a dog who my behavior issue is I'm on-leash reactive, and I like to munch on people's elbows. Okay, I get taken out of my kennel maybe once, and now I'm supposed to go learn how to not do that, and then I'm put back? Is that gonna be that successful? So with playgroup, we get them out in the yard, they tire themselves out, then we can pull off stuff like this video. And so this is in Southampton. I was there somewhere. I think I was probably there biting my nails, worried that all these interns were that's close quarters, right, for a bunch of dogs. But these dogs had all been out to playgroup before this. All of these dogs had experienced versions of on-leash reactivity to dogs prior to pulling this off. So these are all dogs that were on-leash reactive to dogs. They all attended playgroup, and now you're able to pull off some pretty fancy, really valuable training that really sets them up well to go home and stay home, right? When they can be this close to other dogs on leash, their owners aren't have to walk at 2 a.m. to keep them from reacting at other dogs, right? So that training is achievable through playgroup. And then again, even dogs like Olive, who legitimately was demonstrating that's offensive dog aggression, going out of her way to go after dogs. We were able to pull this off, and we'll see if we want to shorten this video for the sake of time, but just to give you some insight, I brought her out on muzzle. With that history, I'm going to bring her out on muzzle. I'm watching my helper dogs. Their opinion of her is extremely valuable. That muzzle may have prevented initially some bad choices there. I can't ask her, but that muzzle was able to just have her come out, work off that whatever that just first impulsive decisions that she's been making, to kind of take that away from her. And then pretty quickly, I was able to take that muzzle off, just let it fall off naturally. And this was again the very first time I ever brought her out to playgroup. I'm used to dogs surprising me, but I was certainly that day like, really? You're not gonna do anything? There's some play bowing, awkward play bows with Chloe right there. I don't know how I remember her name. This was like years ago, but Chloe and Jax right there, two helper dogs. So she's trying out some of these awkward play bow things. She thinks she wants to try this out. And then just real quick, this was pretty much what she did the rest of her time in playgroup. She would just sunbathe and just chill out. She ended up getting adopted. She actually was adopted into a home with another dog. They lived wonderfully for years until the family fell on hard times and had to move and couldn't bring her with. She came back to the shelter recently, was adopted like that, because we were able to, she was perfect, and she was adopted immediately back to a loving home.
Right, and so you can kind of see the trend. Like we said, the first thing we're going to do for our dogs when they enter our system is playgroup. And so Taylor was a dog when he came to us at the city shelter. He was already a long stay. He'd already been there for over 100 days. He had really bad kennel behavior, very bad on-leash reactivity. Truly, he was at risk by them because he was very stoic when he was meeting people. And so when we brought him over to Austin Pets Alive, of course, the first thing we did, can you see the trend here, is we put him into playgroup. Taylor was a dog, however, that playgroup didn't actually really benefit him in the way we're hoping it would, because he wasn't necessarily enjoying his time out there. Leon is a little bit of a different example, but kind of on the same thread. So at the city shelter, Leon actually had a lot of notes about being good with other dogs. And in fact, he was paired with another dog in the kennel, so he's already getting some energy release by being able to be around some sort of group play. However, Leon's behavior in general was very, very challenging for them to handle. And you can see some of his notes here. Basically, he was jumpy, he was humpy, and if you got too close to him, his paws would meet your face, and it was a lovely story that no one wanted to tell. So when we pulled him over to Austin Pets Alive, that continued. He proved, oh yeah, this is a challenging dog to handle. He was consistently passed on by people because he just, when you got into a yard with him, nobody said, yeah, I'll take that 60-pound pitty who's just going to jump on me, knock me over. Let me take that dog home. It's going to be great. And so Leon actually ended up being a long stay, even with his good dog-to-dog behavior, for about 200 days.
So this next segment of dogs, we said, all right, dogs that we can just, the masses come on in, bring them out to playgroup. That was what you needed. Behavior issues are gone. So now these last two dogs, so these are dogs that, okay, we had to now say, all right, what about this next segment of the last 10%? What do we do now? What do we do with the dogs that playgroup wasn't necessarily the only solution? Leon, he enjoyed it. It certainly helped his time there, ensured that we were providing a great quality of life for him, but that really rude behavior persisted. And with Taylor, that was just not as bad. He was just like, nah, I don't really want to be out here. So what do? We put our heads together and we said, well, what if we create a program that we can brag about these dogs as they pass their Canine Good Citizen test? We're already doing the training, but if we could systemize it, embrace our volunteer corps, and really expand our reach to as many of these dogs as possible, create a kind of systemized program so we can attend to the basic obedience, resolve the issues that these dogs are demonstrating, brag about them, market them as being Canine Good Citizen ready, and really bragging about what that means, and then training our volunteer corps up to be able to handle these dogs so that the behavior staff can be mentoring them but working with our toughest cases. So that's the next solution that we found as we're working up the ranks. So Bob and Taylor, it kind of turned into like an inside joke, because whenever they would show up for training after adoption. We offer 3 free sessions after dogs pass CGC and they get adopted. So he'd always show up, and I would just get a text message, and it would just be Bob plus Taylor. And that's all I'd get, would just be Bob plus Taylor. And so I'd go out there, I'd find Bob, and Bob was, I'm from California, and he was like what we always envision as far as Texans go. He was just this, like, wanted to be out in the woods all day. I think he was eating squirrels somewhere. There's no offense to Texans in here.
Offense taken.
You're Texan. But he wanted a dog to just go out. He would go out camping by himself, who knows where, and he wanted a dog that he could go out and have off-leash and go adventure with. And so it was really rewarding to be able to work with them and to ensure that the training we did in shelter stuck in the home, but then even higher aspirations. He wanted to be out in the woods with a dog off-leash for days on end. So we worked with them to ensure that Taylor there hung out next to him even though there were deer around and whatnot. What's pretty friggin' sweet is that he passed the test in 2 weeks and was adopted 20 days later. That was a pretty immediate impact. He showed that he was able to perform that training pretty dang easily. He just needed someone to show him, here's some cool stuff to do.
Right, and Leon, like we said, long stay, 200 days. Nobody wanted to take the dog out. It was, hey, can you bring me Leon for playgroup? Like, nobody wanted to handle this dog. So when we put Leon into the CGC program, it proved to be exactly what he needed on top of playgroup. So playgroup gave us the ability to burn the energy. The CGC gave us the ability to convince the adopters to take him home. And so what we did with Leon, after he passed his CGC test, he was adopted 18 days later. Just because we told somebody, hey, this dog can do all of these great skills, and then we showed them how he can do all of the great skills. And in addition to that, the skills generalized. And what I want to show you guys are some videos of Leon in the home. They never took us up on any kind of post-adoption CGC support. This was all based on just what they were trying to see what Leon could do with them. This is about 2 weeks into their home, I believe. So this first video, there's no sound, so I'm gonna kind of walk you through what's happening. You heard us talk about the kennel routine with Jake. This is him doing the kennel routine to go outside to go to the backyard. So this was not something we taught the adopter how to do. We had talked him through the kennel routine. We explained to him that this was something we did with all of our dogs here, and he said, you know what, that sounds great. I'm gonna do that with Leon. And then this is him, again, I'll kind of talk you through what's happening. This is him in the backyard showing off some of those awesome skills that he learned in CGC, plus a few extras. And they're talking about how Leon is incredibly smart and that he picks up on tricks so quickly. So right now they're doing some sits, some downs. I think that's probably pretty obvious. And then they do some touch work with them. And just in general want to show off how much he is that they love him and that he's doing great and that he's not only able to perform for us in shelter, but that he was able to perform for the adopters in their home as well.
If I just see this one real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
So the next one, yeah.
Oh.
So you guys, how many of you went to Carrie's earlier today, the Canine Good Citizen one? That biggest mistake of your life if you didn't go. Joking.
But not really.
So, you know, what we saw in the first couple of years was an 80% decrease in length of stay for dogs that were participating in the program. That, we knew it was going to be effective. We did not know it was going to be that effective. So a lot of you went to her presentation. The last thing I just want to harp on is it doesn't have to be CGC. We picked that because of the recognition of the CGC test being the first 10 tests to becoming a therapy dog. People seem to really understand the value of that. You know, I know there's class out there, and we've been asked why we don't do that since it's not AKC affiliated, which, believe me, that I embrace that. But there's not the same kind of just message. We had a lot of adopters come through that were adopting because they wanted dogs that they could work to become their personal service dogs. And we thought at first that might be too lofty of an aspiration, but it's been a key component to them going home.
Right, and so kind of as Mike is saying, and if you saw Carrie's presentation earlier, I'm not going to talk too heavily about this because it was fully discussed and you can order the presentation. But the CGC program, the CGC Ready program, was founded actually, you know, by me, and it was started by me, and it was actually started because we saw that there was a need to give a little bit of an additional marketing to our short-coated, blocky-headed dogs. This wasn't necessarily because we felt they need the training. This was just because they seem to have an image problem, and we wanted to give them a little more oomph. Now, if we had a lot of long-stay Yorkshire Terriers in our program, then that would be who we were targeting with the CGC as well. But we don't, so this is who we went for. The CGC is a layering of basic obedience, marketing, and volunteer engagement. And so what we saw in our first year by combining all these three together was this 80% decrease in length of stay, which was really, really phenomenal. Again, if you saw Carrie's presentation earlier, you know that the stats only get better from there. And I think that's all I have to say about it. Oh, and we have internship opportunities available thanks to Maddie's. Check them out on the website.
So the program really has enabled us to really, I think, volunteer retention is a big topic in animal sheltering, and we've been able to create a program that gives our volunteers a really amazing reason to stay, a really amazing reason to go up the ranks in our training levels, and to have this goal with their dogs to be able to achieve such an awesome feat as getting your dog CGC ready. So it's been this whole concept being a basic obedience program, but it has to include empowering your volunteers to do things that historically in the industry we say, oh, that staff have to do that. So BEAU here, kind of next segment of dogs. So all right, CGC program, that solved the dogs that playgroup isn't the only solution for them. Great. Now what? Now who's left? Now who else needs us? Now who else do we have to figure out a way to save? So BEAU was a dog who was demonstrating in shelter some protection of his handler. We learned about some territorial behaviors in one adoptive home. They returned him saying, hey, he was kind of protecting us in the household. They weren't willing to work with us, and that was okay. We learned about that. Once he was returned, started to even show that once he was returned, protecting his person from other human beings, like a defensive aggression to humans. So if you're going to place a dog like that, you're going to have to figure out how are we going to ensure that we can safely adopt BEAU out.
So Banana, sweetheart, yes, I know. So Banana was a dog at the city shelter. She had some minor scuffle with some kennel mates. She was a little defensive when being treated for medical. Ultimately, when she was in our care, we didn't have any issues with Banana. She was relatively easy to handle for the majority of our volunteers, albeit a little shy. Where we truly saw some challenges with Banana was when she went into her adoptive home. And it was when she went into her adoptive home that we saw her begin to display heavy on-leash reactivity and a high territorial drive when anyone would enter the house with her owner. But also, in addition to that, if she was on leash with her owner and a dog or a person or a car went by, she became incredibly heavily on-leash reactive towards that person, dog, car as well. And the adopter was an older gentleman and felt like he was having a really difficult time managing Banana, and he actually ended up wanting to pursue a return at a point.
So how are we going to save these guys? Well, we need to be there to support our adopters. We need to be there to say, hey, either in BEAU's case, we know we've got some challenging behaviors that we need to work through. Will you, interested adopter, be willing to come in for some training with our behavior staff, learn the ins and outs of how we're solving this behavior, go home with them, and then we're going to be there for you afterwards as well to continue to work with you. Dogs like BEAU wouldn't have a live outcome if we weren't able to collaborate with the adopter before and after. How do you safely adopt a dog out who you know when they go home are not going to let visitors in the house, right? And so we were able to expand our definition of savable by creating a pre-post adoption behavior support. So forever, for free behavior support for behavior problems. Pretty much already explained how we solved BEAU. Let's show the video though of how we were collaborating with Tiana, his adopter. I'm off camera coaching Tiana on the replacement behaviors we're teaching BEAU. We're out on the trail near APA. There's joggers and walkers all over the place. I just wrangled some people in to helping us. This is real life right here, right? This is where everyone in Austin wants to be with their dog. So we're just teaching Tiana and BEAU replacement behaviors on people are going to walk up to you And BEAU, you're going to hang out next to your mom, offer eye contact, instead of lunging or trying to protect your mother. So Tiana and BEAU rocked it. We collaborated before and after adoption, and they just became such a dynamic duo, and they are living happily ever after. But if we were just kind of like, good luck, hope it works.
Don't take them out in public.
There's no way we'd be able to offer life-saving to that segment of the last 90%.
And so Banana, like I said, the adopter was going to pursue a return. And so what naturally kind of happens in our processes is once they send the return email, it automatically gets pinged to our adoption follow-up supervisor and her team. And so what ended up happening was she reached out to the adopter. She said, hey, I understand you're looking to surrender Banana. I wanted to see if there was anything I could do to help. And they met, and when they met, there was no pressure as far as I am going to sit you down and tell you how to keep Banana into your home. None of that existed. It was an open dialogue and a conversation about what's right for this adopter and what's right for Banana, and what are some things that we could potentially try to get Banana to a place where you're comfortable keeping her. And what we saw through these one-on-one sessions is that the adopter started to learn the skills in order to feel safe in managing Banana's behavior, and therefore he actually ended up keeping Banana. They're still actively going through sessions. I think they're just on like their 9th or 10th session, and she's thriving, guys. She's doing so well because we were able to be there for her and the adopter after they went into the home together.
And if Banana came back, we would have worked with her, but now we've got a dog back in our care who has a history of territorial aggression in the home,
right,
and severe on-leash reactivity. She's destined to be a long stay at that point, right? We've got someone who already loves her, so let's work with them, and let's keep her home. So I think you guys get it as far as adoption follow-up. Now, the one point I'll make on the slide that I haven't made already is when we're talking about allocation of resources, we would much rather spend time on the back end supporting our adopters to keep their dogs than trying to predict and do standardized behavior assessments, trying to figure out who they are. Let's embrace the fact that we aren't ever going to be able to predict that. We don't have a crystal ball, so let's be there afterwards to work with them. And we've talked about it at this conference, but the science is now showing us that standardized behavior assessments aren't the way to go. They're not as predictive as we hoped they were. So that's phone consultations, email stuff, that's in-person training sessions. We'll go to the home if the behavior warrants it, and if they live like 20 to 30 minutes from us. And it's for free. It's for behavior challenges. It's not basic obedience. We'll refer them to local trainers in the community. So that's about the first half of the 10%, right? That'll get you to about 95%. I believe that's kind of the recipe, and I believe that really any shelter who has the motivation and the drive can and should offer these programs. Amy talks all the time, Sadler, about the difference between enrichment and behavior, and I think it needs to become standard. And I don't know if you guys heard Kristen Auerbach's passionate, whatever we want to call it, I won't say rant, but very passionate explanation of why everyone should be running playgroups. That CGC volunteer-based training program, absolutely embrace your volunteers. Stop being afraid to teach them how to handle these dogs and train these dogs and walk these dogs. And then be there for your adopters. Be there for your dogs. Work with them after adoption. That's, I think, the heart of getting to 95. Now it's the next 5% that we think gets trickiest.
So Thor is a dog who, adorable, bounced through the majority of the programs that we offer at APA. So he was actually at risk at the city shelter due to dog aggression, not only in the home but also in the shelter. So of course APA said, yes, thank you, we'll take that. At APA, he was incredibly friendly towards people. So friendly and such a smart, fun dog that we ended up putting him in the CGC program where he was adopted pretty quickly. It was through post-adoption sessions with CGC, with our CGC coordinator, Carrie, that we actually discovered that he had defensive and fear-based behavior if people would approach him and the adopter on leash, or if they went to reach to pet him, if they walked into the house and attempted to touch him too quickly. There would be a lot of snapping, a lot of growling, a lot of trying to give communication that he wasn't very comfortable. And so it was through AFU sessions that we actually managed to keep him in the home for 2 years, which was great. The unfortunate part is that his owner moved into a situation where THOR couldn't be managed as easily, and he did have to return him after 2 years. When he was returned, he was no longer eligible for the Canine Good Citizen due to the behaviors we had seen in the home.
And then there's Clemmy.
Oh boy.
Clementine represents what we call generalized garters, dogs that we were starting to see more than we thought we were going to ever see in the last 5%. It's actually become... Amy's met her. She's a dog that will always remember and always love. And she helped us actually create protocols to actually modify generalized garters. Up until that point, we hadn't really ever been able to consistently save them. So Clemmy here, when I say generalized garter, she would guard anything. So the point of this slide is that she would guard receipts, pen caps, baseball caps,
outlets,
electrical outlets, office chairs, food, toys, anything. This is 2 different homes that we accrued all of this history. And so we said, holy crap, we've got to figure out if we can save this dog. And we did not know if we could. I mean, that's how do you safely place her, right? So that's Clemmy. Here's just quickly just an insight into us checking out her behavior.
So if someone were to take her home,
this is where it becomes harder, is because it's going to be harder for us to say what exactly is a resource. So, like,
would she just need really strict boundaries?
yeah.
She's going through the full threat displays. I do believe you'd have to be an idiot to get bitten by this dog. But the fact is, in home, she's stealing anything she can get and then going into a corner and getting stuck in these threat displays. Literally like 2 hours incapable of pulling herself out of this state of mind. The previous adopter had to leave the house and just drove away for 2 hours and came back hoping she had just snapped out of it. So that was what we were dealing with. So that's Clemmy, generalized garters in the last 5%. So that's when you really need to decide, are you equipped to handle these dogs? Amy Sadler's dream, her model, and I agree with it, is regional behavior centers, places that are actually equipped to work with these dogs. We've made the decision as an organization that we're gonna create resources, we're gonna hire staff, we're going to train ourselves to become behavioral experts so that we can try to modify these behaviors and save these dogs. But otherwise, you have really no business even trying to get to these guys if you don't have the framework in that we described earlier in this presentation.
So just due to time, I'm going to really quickly kind of wrap up THOR. TLDR, we put him in our Top Dog program.
And I'll explain Top Dog. So Top Dog was, and you guys heard about it in Carrie's presentation, but Top Dog was, all right, how do we still create a systemized way of attending to these more severe cases? We still want to embrace our volunteers. We need to embrace our volunteers and train our volunteers up. So Top Dog allows our behavior staff to assess the behavior, prescribe the training plan, mentor the volunteer, coach the volunteers, but the volunteers are the ones in charge of the actual training. And then they have access to the behavior staff for updates, to demonstrate that the dogs are progressing, to ensure that generalization is occurring. And so Top Dog still allows us to be able to not be as outnumbered as we always are, because we're able to still empower our volunteer base to train dogs that historically in sheltering would either not be alive or they would be being worked with by very lettered trainers, right? So quick video on kind of what we like to do in class. This is prepping for a music video. It was South by Southwest. We had a musician contact us 2 days earlier and say, I want to come to a music video with your dogs. And we said, that's badass. So fortunately, since we train our dogs so much and have these types of volunteer programs, we knew we had dogs that could pull it off. But let's just do a quick little, Joe, you play the guitar. Can you just come in, act like you're a musician? I guess you wouldn't like it if I said act like. And let's prepare for it. So just some of the fun stuff we like to do in class. So Clemmy,
Oh, Clemmy Gear.
we did it. She was a dog that we had to really come up with protocols. We consulted with Amy. I think Amy, you came out and saw some of our progress with her. And we were able to teach her that when a human approaches anything that you have, that is an environmental cue to go lay down on your bed. No matter what. No, it's not optional. It doesn't matter who the human is. It doesn't matter what the item is. But if someone approaches you while you have that item, that's your cue to go lay down somewhere. And we actually pulled it off. So really quickly, this is Clemmy in the home. That's Travis filming. And her adopters, you guys, were first-time dog owners. They were 2 college kids, and they came in multiple times to work with us prior to adoption, and we worked with them after adoption just to ensure she was performing all of her behaviors in the home. We do embrace all tools and techniques at APA. We know that we need to be able to learn how to use techniques that historically we may not need to, or tools that generally may be misused. We need to learn how to have the biggest toolkit possible, because dogs like Clemmy need us to figure out how to save her. So we were able to use an electronic collar, but it was not in any way that was all the horror stories we hear about. We needed to find a way to ensure that Clemmy understood that this has to happen. You have to be able to leave those items, no matter who the person is. And if you have questions after the presentation, I'm happy to answer them. But I didn't want you guys going, what's on her neck? What is that? Why aren't you mentioning that? And so she doesn't wear it anymore. It's been 2 years since she wore it. And she's never shown guarding in the home. So we're very, very proud of her. So these are the trends, you guys. These are the trends that we're seeing within the last 5%. We're seeing generalized guarders like Clemmy. We're seeing territorial aggression to humans. I'm not going to list all of it off, but these are what we're, for the most part, seeing these days are dogs who have done something in the real world. They've gotten out, they've bitten somebody, they have gotten into fights with dogs in the real world. It's not as common anymore for the dogs that are at risk in our city to be purely shelter-based behavior. And so that adds a component of we've got to work with the behavior in shelter, but we have to also figure out how do we proof this behavior and get them back into that context to ensure that we've actually resolved it. And so these are the dogs that we still aren't saving. When we say that we're saving 99% of the dogs in Austin, 98, 99, these are the reasons why dogs wouldn't be leaving our shelter alive. We have offensive aggression to human. That's very rare. Generally speaking, that's a dog who is going out of their way to harm a human being. They've chosen fight over flight. That's not something we feel like it would be responsible of us to put into the community, a dog who will run across the street and bite someone without any provocation. Again, that's rare. Most aggression is defensive. Amy's going to be talking all about the difference between offense and defense, right? Tomorrow? Cool. Unpredictable aggression to humans. That one we're going to take our time to really try to pinpoint that, because generally speaking, dogs are telling us what is causing their aggression, what is causing them to react that way. But if we cannot pinpoint any kind of trigger, if one day or 1 minute to the next, we cannot figure out what is causing this dog to react aggressively to human beings, we can't safely manage that dog. We can't say, all right, as long as you don't expose them to X, because we don't know what that is. And then we can't actually effectively train that dog or modify that behavior if we don't know what the triggers are. And then lastly would be uninterruptible drive. This generally pertains to dog aggression or prey drive. Now, dog aggression and prey drive are normal. We know that's not aberrant. Dogs, we know we don't require them to like all dogs or to not want to chase cats, right? Where it becomes aberrant is when the dog's drive to seek out that conflict with another dog is just unstoppable. We can't do anything to influence that behavior. When they go, we can't do anything in all of our techniques to influence that and to have them just stop. And that's a tough one. That's one that, we really want to, believe at some point we can resolve, because a lot of times they're human friendly, but we have to also care about the dogs in our community. And I don't want to put a dog out in the community that, given any opportunity to run across the street and attack a dog and then humans can't stop them, we have to care about our dog community as well. And so that again is probably the muddiest one, because you get into really, there's so many factors involved. Because dog aggression by itself is, we specialize in working through dog aggression. But that's when we believe that's too far down the line.
And so, again, just due to time, there are only a few key points that I want to hit on here. So, playgroup happens twice a day, every day. The pictures you're seeing up there, that's the staff. I am the dog behavior co-manager. I can't do it without my partner, Aaron. Hi, Aaron. There he is. So playgroup happens twice a day, every day. Once in the morning, once at night. After morning playgroup happens, behavior staff is attending to those behavior modification cases that we really need to. Simultaneously, we have our adoption follow-up team who's answering emails, phone calls, in-session training, doing whatever we can to help keep those dogs in the home, and also doing whatever we can to help get them out of the shelter and into the homes they need to be.
So, yeah, our obstacles, we're always going to be outnumbered. Our environment, have you guys been to TLAC? Have you been to our shelter?
It's horrible.
Falling apart, right?
So sorry.
It's like the worst shelter environment I've ever worked out of. It's kind of cool. It forces us to be creative and find that, it's been almost 6 years of saying this, and so I'd rather just not have to be, rather have an environment that worked with us. But when you come, at least you're not saying, well, of course they can do it. Look at this facility. You're saying, wow, if they can do it, right? But it's a challenge, absolutely. Extended length of stays, we talk about it a lot this whole weekend, right? We're dealing with a population of dogs that we know they're not gonna leave anytime soon. We have to find ways to chip away that length of stay. We have to find ways to solve this while they're with us. Emily Grossheider said it perfectly. It's not kill more, it's do more, right? While we're putting our feet in the sand and saying we are not going to kill for time or for space, abso-freaking-lutely, but you have to be there for your dogs. Every day they're with you has to be meaningful. They have to be benefiting while they're with you, no matter how long it takes. And you should never be okay with the kinds of length of stays that we're seeing. We're seeing dogs in our care for hundreds and hundreds of days, and we know we need to address that, but we also know that it's uncharted territory, and we have to be able to save these dogs. These dogs still belong on the life-saving bus. So that's it, guys. So we really believe that, again, playgroup's got to happen, CGC volunteer program, behavior support for your adopters, then the really tricky stuff happens, and don't be afraid to try. We always talk about how if you make a decision to end a dog's life, it's final. You're never going to be able to learn what could have happened if you had embraced different techniques or implemented different programs. So that's it. We're done. We're over.